Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast talking about wellness and resilience. And today I have Charlotte with me. Hi, Charlotte.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. Thank you for joining me on this podcast. It's awesome to have you.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Do you want to introduce yourself to the people who are listening or watching?
Yeah, so my name's Charlotte. I'm 39 and live in Southampton. And I have two children with my husband Steve. And my main aim in life is to help people um, succeed in the best way possible. So I'm an occupational therapist by background. So I went into that industry wanting to help other people, helping to promote independence, helping to try and live their best lives. And then off the back of that, personally, we've had our own struggles at home with my husband's mental health. So I've become kind of a mental health advocate from his struggles and trying to make something positive out of all we've been through, really. So I have two avenues and I try to help people in that way.
And that's awesome. When I first came across you, because oh my gosh, I have become a TikTok addict, and I resisted it for so long, Charlotte. Honestly, I was like, TikTok, I'd roll my eyes and I'd be like, there's no way I'm going near it. And then I went near it one day and got hooked.
It's a
um,
wormhole, isn't it? It is a wormhole.
it is, but once you get past the algorithm, there's so much rich content, and there's
Yeah,
so many people like you that are just doing some really valuable and important work on there. Um, and I think it provides hope and information, education to so many people, and I think it's amazing.
thank you. Yeah.
Um,
So we only started TikToking in February. Like you, I didn't really know anything about it. I thought it was for the kids, and
yeah,
I wasn't really sure. And I tried different avenues to try and get the mental health message out there, and hadn't had a great deal of success on Facebook and Instagram. And came across TikTok, and it's been hugely successful in that respect, in being able to share and people being able to relate and feel like they have things in common, I suppose.
yeah, there is something different about TikTok, I think, which is there's just something more raw and honest about and transparent about the way the lived experience is told, more so than any other platform, I think.
Mm, mm. Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so right, I'm gonna kick us off. I always ask people the same question to open, because I always get such different answers and I love hearing answers. What is your own definition of wellness and resilience?
But, being able to feel your emotions and being able to acknowledge them without them having to necessarily mean anything is kind of my own definition of resilience. Because for a very long time, and I do still think that there's still this massive expectation that when you feel a negative emotion, it has to be fixed. It has to be fixed immediately.
Yeah,
What's wrong with me? I'm not happy. Things aren't right. And actually, when we can learn to just acknowledge whatever emotion we're having and give it a nod, and respect it and say it's here for a reason, and just let it be. It's there. It's serving a purpose, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything. When I learned that, things changed for me a lot. I found I was able to cope with those emotions and different things a lot better, and know that they will come and go, and that's quite normal. So for me, that's my sort of meaning of resilience, and well-being, um, is is so holistic. It's a massive combination of what works for you in helping you to feel well. So it's going to be different for everybody. For me, my biggest well-being resources and tips are a good diet, exercise, and sleep. Those three things, if either one of them are out, I will really feel the hit on my well-being. And so for me, it's quite an easy fix as well. Then, if I know that I'm not feeling great, one of those things has fallen by the wayside.
yeah, they're just such solid basics, aren't they? And I don't think all people realise. I think if people feel like there's something off, then they automatically go to, oh, like there's something emotionally wrong. And sometimes it is just as basic as those three things. Um, So yeah, it's interesting. Not always easy though. So
No.
especially sleep is for me. That's like a hard one. So that's a hard one for me to control.
And the background to all of that, I suppose. So I I struggled with my mental health probably for most of my adult life. Um, I didn't have the emotional intelligence that I've just described there to be able to manage my own mental health properly. Um, Not through want of not trying, but I didn't understand. I didn't understand where it all lay. So when I had a normal upbringing. I've had no trauma as a child as such, and then as a 21-year-old experienced a very close family member trying to take their life, and I found them. And then I've talked about my husband's journey as well, and we've had several points of crisis there where I've found him having unfortunately attempted to. So I've had trauma since, and was diagnosed with a low grade anxiety from when I was 21 as a result of what I saw then. And then following my husband's illness, PTSD was diagnosed.
Mm.
And I had an awful lot of therapy around that and medications. And I was on citalopram for 16 years actually. But I was still experiencing the real troughs and peaks of emotion and that were not hugely well managed. Until I sort of came across some information around how we set these core beliefs as children, and they are ingrained in our psyche and our subconscious. And I wanted to find out what these core beliefs were that were ingrained in me and causing me maybe to be stuck in this cycle sometimes. And yeah, there was ultimately a real lack of self-worth. I think a lot of children probably experience that somewhere along the line, and I hadn't been, those feelings hadn't really been challenged. It's not that anybody had told me that as such, but I had perceived this and those feelings hadn't been challenged. So once I had that understanding and that knowledge, and I was able to rationalize and realize that, you know, that those aren't founded, and have some help with rewriting those sort of self core beliefs, it has really helped with my journey to well-being being much better. So highlighting those three areas of sleep, diet and exercise for me. Everybody always says, you know, those are the three things you need to do, but actually realizing how that impacts me now, I have much more a connection to it and can really see it.
Mm.
And feel all those emotions, like I said before, and know where they're coming from. It's been quite powerful.
Yeah, I'd love to ask if that's okay about the difference between your therapy experience with all the PTSD and then this figuring out these core beliefs. Were those two linked, or was that a separate thing, a separate therapist, or somebody completely different? And
So
what was most
very,
helpful?
very different. So with the PTSD, I had clinical psychology, and I had exposure therapy, which was absolutely brutal. So the idea there is that your brain is trained to be exposed to whatever traumatized you on repeat until it no longer is a trauma. You no longer respond to it in the same way. So as you can imagine, that was very, very hard to go through. So I had to write down my experiences of the day that I found my husband unresponsive, and all of my feelings surrounding that day. And then I had to record it with me reading that out and then listen to it on repeat over and over and over again, until I could hear it without crying or hear it without really feeling the same attached emotions that I had on that day of fear and anxiety and sadness and all those things. So whilst I still think about that time as sad, and I do still get tearful about it sometimes, I don't have the same PTSD response of going into a mild panic attack, having flashbacks, that kind of thing. So it was helpful in that respect. But the therapy that I had since, so I only had it in 2020 for my anxiety, and it's called rapid transformational therapy.
Hmm.
It's a combination of neuro-linguistic programming, CBT, and hypnosis. And there's lots of evidence for all those therapies separately, but not together. And the idea is that you go back into a state of hypnosis to discover what these core beliefs are. And when they've been discovered, they then, in hypnosis, rewrite those beliefs. The theory behind it is that as children, we are in a theta brainwave pattern. So we are, and that's the brainwave pattern you're in when you're in hypnosis. So they take you back to that brainwave pattern to rewrite those beliefs. Whether it's hocus pocus or whether it's whether it works, I don't really care, because it did really work for me, and I've had people say that has been successful for them. But I truly believe it just gave me that knowledge, like I said, to know where those beliefs came from, and helped me to reframe my own thoughts around who I am and how I feel about myself. It was quite empowering. So you have your session, and you can have one session or up to 3 sessions. It depends how severe they are, your thoughts, and whether you've connected. And then they record a hypnosis for you to listen to every day for 3 weeks. It's 20 minutes long, because the brain loves repetition. And then at the end of those 3 weeks, you have a review and to see how things are going. So it was so successful for me that I had that in October 2020. I weaned off my citalopram that I'd been on for 16 years, and I've not gone on it since. So I've been off that now for 3 years. And I have to say that my emotions have never been more stable. I do honestly feel like I can process things so much better. I can allow myself to feel whatever I need to feel, and not feel bad about that, and to normalize it, which has been really, really powerful. So I would say, in terms of helpfulness, they both had their place. I definitely needed that support to get through the panic attacks and the fear side of things. So they were dealing with 2 quite different things. But going forward, for me, I felt like I had been given a new chance, if that makes sense, with this RTT. Just felt like a new person. I was much more confident. My friend said it looked like a weight had been lifted, like my eyes had changed. There was just something where I just felt I had my own self-belief, which was, that's all anybody could ever hope for, isn't it?
That's incredible. And does that require some kind of conscious effort or noticing, or do you find that the effects of the RTT just is kind of almost automatic?
Sometimes I'll repeat to myself. So one of the repetitions in the hypnosis is about being enough and being worthy. And some mornings, if I have a negative thought or something, I will just reassure myself, and it comes naturally now in your head, like, you're enough, you're worthy, it's fine. Remember, you deserve this, whatever. I've had that recently with this real feeling of imposter syndrome on TikTok. Like, do people really want to hear what I have to say? Is it valid? Should I be here? And having to reassure myself that people will let me know if what I have to say isn't valid. And actually, the overwhelming response has been, thank you for being here. So although I've still had that external validation, I've had to really think, it's okay, you're worthy, it's fine, what you're doing is good. So it does cross over into the conscious. You do then start to think about it. And equally, if I'm not having a good time, if I've let my diet slip, or if I've let my exercise slip, and I'm feeling a little lower than I normally would, I'll put the hypnosis back on that night just to reinforce anything that I might need, so I know that it's always there. But I don't necessarily need to. It's just almost like a bit of a comfort comfort to do it.
And how have those things kind of, because your husband, he still kind of has ups and downs?
Yeah, so he's a bit of an enigma, Steve. We haven't still got a formal real diagnosis of what's going on. So for his problem started in his late teens, and he's had many attempts on life, which has been very, very sad. And they've diagnosed him with generalized anxiety disorder ever since he was 18. And it's only in the last 2 years that I've really been questioning that, saying there's something more here. He doesn't struggle with anxiety on a day-to-day basis, and he goes for very long periods of time absolutely fine. There's no day-to-day of him feeling unsure of himself or worry or anything like that. It's either fine or absolutely rock bottom. So the impulsivity was high. So we're now looking at bipolar 2. And the very fact that actually when he was on a slight combination of medications that incidentally would have treated bipolar anyway, they just put him on that regardless, he was the most stable he's ever been, and I think that's quite telling. So at the moment we're good. His last episode was October 21 to March 22, and that was a very long episode for him. Normally he's in and out within a few weeks, but before that we'd had 5 years of him being absolutely fine. So it's very difficult to manage and being able to kind of plan for or support, because you just don't know when it's going to come.
Yeah, sure. And have you found that the therapies that you've had makes you, I don't know, are you always on edge and like the anticipatory anxiety of when he might be unwell, or has the therapy been able to, I don't know, help you with that? Or
so the underlying residual symptom from the PTSD is hypervigilance, and that I don't think that will ever go. But I manage it as best I can. So I found by just being open and honest and managing expectations. So for Steve, I'm just honest and say, look, when I don't hear from you, when you know you're going to tell me you're going to leave for work or whatever, if I don't hear from you that you're coming home, then my brain just goes off on a tangent, like you're in an accident or something's happened or whatever. So if you could just let me know when you're leaving work, so I know that you're going to be home in 40 minutes, then I can know when I need to panic if you don't arrive home in an hour and a half. It's that kind of thing. So I manage my expectations in that way. And I'm just, like I said, just really kind to myself. I have days where some days I'm just like, wow, I'm tired. It is exhausting being vigilant all the time. And just being kind on that. I know why. I don't feel like I'm in a constant anxious state of worry, but I'm just aware there's a bit of a background kind of like, oh, I just need to be mindful of that. And that's where those diet, exercise, sleep things come into it and help me to manage to keep that at a manageable level.
Yeah. Other than those three things, like as a foundation, I suppose, do you do anything else kind of self-care wise, or that you do for yourself that helps?
Yeah, and I've only recently given permission to myself to do that. So that's the other thing. When before this therapy, when I wasn't well, I lived in this, I guess it's probably from upbringing as well, but you've lived in this kind of, I'm here to serve others. I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an occupational therapist. I'm always helping other people, and I never really gave my permission to ever put myself first. And I think a lot of women in particular feel the same. So it's only recently that I've given my permission to quieten that little person on my shoulder saying, no, you're not allowed to do that, and actually do it. So following last year, following the crisis we went through, sort of 6 months of being on edge with Steve, being very unwell. In the July, I booked a holiday just for me. I went to Mallorca for 3 nights on my own, no friends, just me, which was very brave and out of my comfort zone anyway. But I went to an adult-only hotel, all-inclusive, for 3 nights, and I treated myself because I felt like I needed it. I needed some time to myself to gather my thoughts, to recharge, not have to mum, not have to worry. I made sure that there was support here for Steve and the kids, so I didn't have to worry about that, and just give myself some time. And then this year I've gone away with some friends, like just in the UK. We haven't gone abroad, but 3 nights away again, so that I feel like I've got away and I've had some time, and just spending more time on me. Don't necessarily have to go away, but my self-care is I go for daily walks. I like my skincare. I do a lot of that, and yeah, that's kind of my self-care, giving myself permission to do that, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to kind of, as a transition, isn't it? I think it's a difficult transition. How did you, I'm just going to assume that you felt a tiny bit of guilt at the beginning of doing that. Can you explain how you became a bit more at ease with it?
I did feel guilt, but I was also made to feel guilt by a few family members.
Oh, right.
Yeah, interestingly, and it's interesting perhaps where those then thought processes came from originally, maybe.
Okay.
Um, so having to deal with that and stand firm and say, actually, why does my mental health matter less than the person I'm supporting? Why? Because if I'm not well and I can't look after myself, then I've got no hope in supporting somebody else either. And there's that famous phrase, isn't there? You can't serve from an empty vessel. I can't. And I got very close to burnout a few times, and actually have learned I need to quieten that guilt feeling. It's not something to be guilty about. It's self-care. It's responsible. If I want to go on supporting Steve to the extent that I do, then I need to be able to feel well enough to do that. And there were times in his crisis where I wasn't well enough to do that, and I felt very broken, and it was I can't support you here. I can't do this anymore because I have nothing left. The gap in mental health services means that there wasn't really anywhere for him to be able to go once he was discharged from psychiatric ward, and I couldn't parent. We had, my children are 10 and 7. I couldn't parent and care for Steve and do everything. And I was finding I was having to choose, between who I was going to spend my time with and who deserved it most and what was I meant to do. And it was very difficult. I became very overwhelmed because I was exhausted. So I learned very quickly, actually, get the help in. Something really, really useful that I learned to do, because lots of people were asking how they could help. And I didn't know, I didn't like to ask. I didn't like to ask people to do certain things. So I actually wrote a list. I wrote a list of things that I would find helpful. It might be things like collecting the food shop, doing some washing for me, whatever, collecting the kids from school, just so I didn't have to worry about being in 3 places at once. And I gave my friends this list and I said, if you're comfortable doing anything off that list, just pick one. And then they didn't feel that they were under pressure to have to do something when I said, could you get the kids from school? But they couldn't manage that, actually, but they still want to help. So actually, if I gave them a list, they could choose something they feel that they were able to help with. So they felt they were being helpful. I was getting the help in return, and it kind of managed everybody's expectations. So once I learned to do that, then does that really answer your question? I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, sorry. But
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great idea. Because I think oftentimes, but they say this in times like bereavement and stuff, they sort of suggest that don't ask what you can do, because actually the person doesn't always know in that moment. And actually I think it's awesome that you had the foresight to write a list, and that people were responsive to that. I think that's amazing.
I think it just helped everybody. Then they're not under any obligation if they don't feel they can do anything off the list. They don't have to. Yeah.
I know you mentioned about the gap in mental health resources, and this is something I've experienced recently as well, actually, how sometimes you literally feel like that there is literally nothing. There's literally nobody coming. There's literally nowhere to go, and there's literally nothing anybody can do. And that is quite an overwhelming and
it's frightening.
disheartening and frightening. Yeah, frightening. I don't know, can you speak a little bit more about your experience of that?
Yeah, so I'll just do a bit of a trigger warning, I suppose, because I will talk a little bit about Steve's attempts and what sort of happened. So just so people are aware. But so in 2016 was Steve's first attempt that I had experienced. We got together in 2007, so we'd had like 9 years of him being fine. We'd got married, we'd had kids, things were good. And the kids were 4 and 1 at the time. So it was a difficult time with young children anyway. The 1-year-old wasn't sleeping. Steve had experienced a new job, and his mental health has always been around expectation on himself, self-imposed expectation, but he puts a lot of pressure on himself, and things have to be perfect, and there's a real rigidity of thinking there that if they're not, then he's failed. So notoriously for him, he's a college lecturer, so notoriously for him, going back to college after the summer break, that time of year is always really difficult. he became very unwell in the October and beginning of November, and I couldn't cope with him here with a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old when he was actively saying he was feeling suicidal, and I didn't really know what to do. So I took him to the hospital, took him to A&E. They agreed to admit him because of his history, and he had an extensive history of serious attempts. And so they kept him in the hospital, and the community mental health team came to see him at 3 a.m. and said, your wife and your children are your protective factors, so you can go home. So there was no discussion around whether I could manage him at home, whether I was able to cope with that, how they were going to support him and follow him up, and whether he was okay with that. So he came home on the Monday, still feeling very, very unwell, with a planned call from the psychiatrist on the Tuesday, but we never made it to Tuesday morning. So he took a substantial overdose and was then in a coma in intensive care for several weeks. He was very, very lucky to survive. So that's that episode, and there's this kind of expectation that if people have protective factors, what other people perceive are protective factors, then they're not going to therefore attempt. But actually for Steve, we were the reason he felt he needed to not be here anymore, because he wanted to relieve of his burden, not that we were a reason for him not to be here. So I think that's really, really important for people to realise, that yes, people have family and loved ones that would be devastated if you're not here. But that's not going to stop somebody if they are intent on doing harm to themselves. So that, I was very annoyed with that, actually, given his history and how significant his attempts have been before, why they didn't just agree there and then for him to be informally admitted to a psych unit to be kept safe. And then this episode, it took 5 days for the crisis team to come. So I was phoning every day. He's suicidal. I'm having to watch him 24/7. I haven't slept. I can't sleep because I need to know that he's safe. I've removed everything that could be of harm, but I've also got the children here. I've got to do school runs. He won't get in the car with me for that. There's dangers of him being here on his own. Like, I can't do this on my own. I was having to rely on family members and friends to come and sit with him so I could just take the kids to school, or they would take the kids to school because I couldn't leave him. So there is this massive gap, and I don't blame any individual. I blame the lack of resources, the lack of funding, the lack of staff, the very underfunded NHS that have never put an emphasis on mental health over physical health. But for us, that gap and that lack of need was so apparent, so apparent. And we are lucky we have the support system we do, and Steve is lucky, but you can see why suicide rates are so high and why people struggle to get the help they need, because it's just not there.
Yeah.
So,
and like, as a listener of that story, that is devastating. Like, just the compassion towards that is just huge, because I can't think of anything more hard to deal with. That's very hard.
It's terrifying. It is terrifying. And psych wards have nurses on shift for that very reason, and there's more than one of them. And for 5 days I had no break. I had no sleep, I had no break. And it was becoming very apparent that mistakes were going to be made, and I was becoming frustrated and angry when you're constantly repeating and reassuring somebody who's anxious and low in mood, and you get snappy. I'm not proud of that, but I was exhausted, and actually it became like, well, this isn't the safest place for him, because I just don't think I can do it anymore. And we went on that cycle through those 6 months, probably 3 or 4 times. He did get admitted twice. Once just because I was on my knees and it had been going on for so long, and it started in the October. He was admitted in the February, so it took 4 months for me to beg for some support. He was in for a week and they sent him home. They didn't really do anything. And then the second time he was admitted was following another attempt, and they actually asked me to drive him in, because the ambulance would have to cross boundaries, and I really put my foot down and I said, would you feel safe driving an actively suicidal person in a car on a motorway to a hospital? I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You need to take him in an ambulance, and everybody's kept safe.
Mhm.
So having the presence of mind to do that is really, really difficult. I'm
Mhm.
fortunate I have a bit of a not medical background. I'm a therapist, but I've worked in healthcare for 20 years, that I understand how things work probably a bit better than somebody who doesn't. But this is where there's that gap. There is not enough emphasis on supporting those who look after people with mental health problems, and then
Yeah,
ultimately end up with mental health problems themselves because they're not supported enough.
absolutely. And I know that they sometimes say you can get a carers assessment, but I don't know what your experience of that was. No, it
I didn't
wasn't
have
offered,
one. I
or
was I was put forward for one, and I never received it. I never received it. Um, so I did register as his formal carer because
Mhm.
when he is not well, he needs somebody to advocate for him. So I'm registered as a formal carer, but it's almost laughable because the majority of the time he doesn't need that. He's a man with a conscious mind and has capacity, and he's absolutely fine. Um, but there are times when he does need me to act as that person, and I don't I don't know if I like the label being a carer in a way. I I will be open and honest and say I never really chose that for myself. Nobody chooses that for themselves when they are marrying somebody, that you make the vow that it's in sickness and in health, but you hope that you'll never have to um, be that person who has to make those really difficult decisions for that person. And unfortunately, there is an entire demographic of people who do.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's different. It's a very difficult double role to play, that of wife and carer, because
mm,
actually you want to be more the wife.
mm,
So that is difficult.
yeah, yeah.
Can I ask what your kids understand about it?
So obviously in the first episode they were so young they didn't really understand. Elliot, obviously being one, doesn't remember anything. Anna does remember Daddy being away for a long period of time. So he was in hospital for, in total, probably about 5 months. And of course, visiting him in a psych hospital, we had to go to the family room. Wasn't a really nice environment to be in. And although he was informal and not sectioned and could leave, um, he really wasn't well enough for me to trust to do that with the kids, if that makes sense. Sounds awful that you don't trust your husband, but in terms of risk for himself, I didn't feel it was really sensible. He came home on home leave a few times, but for a day, but not very often. So she does remember parts of that, and I do think that there is a little bit of an overlap with how emotionally she copes with some things now. I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, but this time they were 9 and 6, so much more aware. Um, Anna coped with it amazingly. She's my eldest. And we talk very openly about mental health at home because we believe that never happened to us both as children, and actually to promote healthy mental health, that's what we want to do. They're not old enough to understand the concept of suicide. It's not the right time. But we will have to have that conversation with them at some point, because particularly with the work that we're doing now with sharing our story publicly, and the book and all those kinds of things, we need to talk to them about that in due course. But I'm very much trying to protect them from that at the moment. My youngest, Elliot, has shown signs of anxiety, like an attachment anxiety from Steve not being here for some time. He was in and out of hospital, and we talk openly about how he feels about that. But for him, his anxiety is mainly at night time and being left alone to go to sleep. And I think he worries, will Daddy be here when I wake up? Or, so we're having to do a lot of work of reassurance. And I will sit with him until he goes to sleep if he needs me to. I'll be there for as long as he needs me to do that. But also just giving him that reassurance a lot of the time that, mummy and daddy will be honest with you, and if daddy isn't well, then we'll let you know, but you don't need to worry about that at the moment. He's doing really well and things are okay.
I think it's just that communication is so important, isn't it, for children, because otherwise their imaginations go all sorts of places.
We had some support from the district nursing team, no, sorry, health visitor team when they were younger, so under fives. They will support more to make sure that I'm okay looking after them. But they recommended a book called The Colour Thief, which is aimed at children sort of 3 to 8, I think. And it just describes a little boy's journey with his dad who had depression, and it was quite nice, so they could understand why daddy was in hospital, and that was nice. So yeah, like you say, that just open communication and being honest. They see mummy cry, they saw mummy cry a lot, and you know, and I would say to them, I know that mummy's upset right now, but mummy misses daddy, mummy's worried about daddy. It's okay for me to cry about that, and I want you to know that I'm not sad with you or upset with you, and mummy just needs to let her emotions out. So but it is going to have had some impact on them. It will do for sure. And it's just trying to keep that dialogue going, that they can come and talk to us about how they're feeling.
Mm. I was just curious as to whether you have any kind of self-care, well-being type activities that you do as a family together.
We play games. We play board games a lot. Family time is always, so we always sit together at mealtime. We sit around the table at the end of each day and we just share our day, and I think that's really, really important. It gives everybody an opportunity to say how they're feeling, what's been happening, what's been going on. The kids get that validation if they've done really well at school, you know, oh, you know, we're really proud of you, that's really great. And they hear mummy and daddy talking about their day and their emotions and their feelings, you know, good or bad. So that's something it's a bit of a non-negotiable for me, is that we always have family meal time. And yeah, we like to play games together. Elliot particularly loves that. Just we all play the game of life or Scrabble or something. We'll all just sit down together and we just have that time together. So yeah, there's things. We'll go for a walk together, and one-on-one time with the children. Elliot likes to play football with daddy, but then he likes to sit and read with mummy. Anna likes to go and do some stuff with daddy at Costco and things, and then she'll like to sort of do skincare and things with me. So we do lots of things together, and then one-on-one with the kids. So yeah, there's lots of sort of self-care there with them, and reminding them that we don't have to be 100 miles an hour all the time. There's some days where we just sit and we chill, and I don't care if the telly is on for a few hours at a time. If that's what we need to do and just have quiet time, that's fine.
Yeah, like listening to what you all need is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask about what I'd like to ask about is how you promote, like, wellness and resilience in others. And there's a couple of different avenues I want to talk to you about. So one of them is obviously the book that you've been working on, and the other is obviously, because sometimes you do content on your TikTok as well about PIP applications, and obviously your role as an occupational therapist. So I wondered if you could talk about kind of wellbeing resilience in terms of those two things.
So for a long time after Steve had been unwell, I always felt that there was something had to come from, like, there was a reason. I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason, whether they're good or bad. Something was leading me down this avenue, and there has, and also I felt like something positive has to come out of something that was really quite difficult, because if we go through all of that for nothing, I just don't feel that there would have been any learning from it. We identified that massive gap in support for people, where you're not unwell enough for the mental health team perhaps, but not well enough to cope alone, and you just need some support strategies or something for people to support you with. And also that a lot of mental health problems develop in teenage years, adolescence, and that there's CAMHS are so overrun and don't have the opportunity, and the NHS services are responsive and reactive, and they're not proactive. So I don't know I didn't really know what I needed to do. I didn't really know what this feeling was, but there was something there that I was saying, there's something bigger here, Steve. Something's calling me. I don't know what it is, but it's going to happen at some point. I'm not quite sure. Then I, like you, kind of thought about TikTok, and I was like, well, I guess we could share our story there. We might reach more people, and maybe people might not feel so alone. So I started just vlogging. I shared our story. I shared the intensive care journey. I share all my thoughts around mental health, how it impacts us as a family. And the response was great. And then, rightly or wrongly, I don't know whether I don't know whether I'm pleased that I did this or not, but I used to assess for the personal independence payment as an OT. I did it for 15 months. The job broke me, and I really did not approve of the criteria that people needed to meet to be awarded. I didn't feel like I was helping people at all, and the very nature of being an OT was being stripped away from me, really. So I left, but I felt on TikTok there may be people who need to hear what is needed to be able to have a successful claim, but also to help try and manage expectations on when you do apply. It isn't just a case of saying, well, this is what I've got and this is how it affects me, so can I have a benefit payment? It's very difficult to achieve. So I've shared some things around PIP, which inadvertently grew the TikTok following, of course. But with that came a lot of negativity, because the DWP are not hugely generous and people find the system very difficult. And I was then the face of a system that's very broken and got a lot of backlash. So, and it wasn't the reason I was on TikTok in the first place. It was to share the mental health journey. So I have moved away. I will answer people's questions, but I have moved away from the PIP content because that's not what I want to focus on. But I can help in some respect with that. So from sharing our story on TikTok, I shared some of Steve's coping strategies for his well-being, and one of them was a crisis box that he'd been encouraged to put together that has lots of things in to help remind him of why his life is worth living and why he's good enough. And in the box was a book that he'd put together with memories and quotes and all kinds of different things. And somebody said, well, if there was a template of something like that, then I'd find that really useful. So that got us thinking, and we were like, well, why don't we create something? So we got to work on the Book of Hope. You can see it sat behind us here. And it's, I've got a copy here. It's just a little A5 booklet that is designed to support people both in and out of mental health crisis. It's meant to be given to people when they're in recovery, because the first section is to be filled when you're feeling reasonably well, and you fill it with things that give you hope. So there is advice on how to write a letter of hope to yourself, a section for happy memories, a list of your favourite things that you write in there. This is my favourite section, for what do other people think of me. So you give the book to your loved ones or people who you respect and value, and they write in your book why they love you and why you're so wonderful. And the idea, and there's more in that section, but the idea of the first section of the book is that you've then created yourself a physical body of evidence that can help to disprove those feelings when you're not well, that nobody cares, life isn't worth living, I don't have anything. It's, you've created it and it's there in black and white and cannot be refuted. It's there. And then the middle section of the book is crisis management strategies and techniques, and lots of things that people would have seen before if they've been through the mental health services. Lots of CBT strategies, some mindfulness and grounding techniques to support you. And then the back of the book is just for sticking in photos and memories and things that make you feel good, that matter to you. So it's very personal to the individual, and I think that's why it's different to just bits of paper that the mental health team give you. You make it your own, and it becomes very treasured. Steve really treasures the book that he made, because it's full of all the things that he loves, and he did sit there and read it when he was not feeling well, and it does really help. Oh, I remember that now, that so and so said that about me, and that's really lovely to hear. And and it did really help to support him in times of need. So that's what we created, and it went live on the 1st of May. But we are now approaching lots of colleges, universities and upper schools, because we feel actually that's the demographic we want to reach. If we can reach people who, before they get to a stage of chronic mental illness, then this might support them better and might prevent that from happening. So there's lots of exciting work there happening with colleges that are looking into providing it for their students and things. So yeah, we're really proud of that. And for something so positive to come out of something so difficult, it's really helped Steve feel validated and know that his journey is helping other people, and it's helped me have a focus in recovery and wellness as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you can give it to somebody and they can put it in. I just think that's such a worthwhile activity to do. I don't know, we don't get compliments very often, do we? And I find that when people get compliments, it's kind of shallow. It's like, oh, your hair's nice today, or oh, I like your shoes. And I just think that something like that is so much more meaningful. And I think that we should tell each other that kind of stuff as more of a matter of course.
Yeah, and there's loads of research out there that suggests that receiving compliments actually boosts your own self-esteem. So, we should do it more. We should do it more.
So can people buy that book?
They can buy the book. So it's £5.99. It won't break the bank. I don't know if you can see the link behind me. So it's bookofhope.myshopify.com.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, and it can be delivered all over the UK. Some have gone out to Canada, there's some in the Netherlands, so that it's getting reach, which is really exciting. The only thing is, obviously, if it's going to go international, then at the back there is a whole list of resources to support in crisis. So lots of useful contacts, which if it's going to be in different countries, we'll have to change that. But so that the useful contacts are just for the UK at the moment. But yeah, it's a real labour of love and something that we really hope we're going to help a lot of people with.
It sounds amazing.
Thank you for letting me share that.
No, because you know what, I've seen snippets of it on TikTok, and it looks fantastic. And I actually feel like it could be beneficial to people that aren't only experiencing kind of suicidal thoughts, that they're just experiencing other kind of emotional health challenges, and I think that would still be beneficial.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think it looks amazing, and I'm going to buy one.
Oh, thank you.
So it looks great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to come up to the last question, but I just want to ask you before we get to the last question, if there's anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to share, or you feel is important to share.
Just really around, just openly talking and breaking that stigma. There's still so much work to do around mental health, and breaking the taboo. I think I feel that a lot of companies pay lip service with having to address mental health, and that's all it is. It's lip service. I don't really feel there's an investment in mental well-being as such. They just have to do it as a bit of a tick box exercise at the moment. So I'd really like to see things develop in that respect, that there are more well-being days for staff, there are more resources available, that there are champions within the workplace, that people are encouraged to say how they feel. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, but just to keep the conversation going, and finally just to say, if asking somebody how they are, you might have to ask them twice before you actually get the proper answer, because most people say, yeah, I'm fine, and then you can say, how are you really? And they may open up a little bit more, and not being frightened to actually say, if they're not feeling well, are you suicidal? It's a question that is never asked, but it could save a life. So even if they say, oh, no, don't silly, I'm really not that unwell, I'm okay, then you can say, okay, I asked the question and I'm satisfied that you're okay.
Yeah, and there's that myth, isn't there, that people are afraid to ask people if they're suicidal because they think it might trigger suicide, but we know that that's not the case. it doesn't trigger somebody into taking action. It's really important to ask.
And we need to take the emphasis off people needing to speak up themselves. We need to share the emphasis on asking other people how they're feeling. It's not just their responsibility to come to us. You know, we have a responsibility to be mindful and ask that question. Yeah, that was it really.
Okay. All right, so my last question is, can you name like a character strength or a value or a strength that's really, or a trait, personality trait that's really strong within you that you use in a positive way towards your well-being?
So I've always been told I was a headstrong child, and quite stubborn in that respect, and that was seen as a negative thing for a very long time. But I do believe that being headstrong and knowing what I want a lot of the time, and being able to articulate that has helped a lot with Steve's journey and my recovery, because I've been able to say, no, I don't need that, or yes, I do need that, or no, you haven't answered my question. Without being a bully or being rude, but just, you know, no, I don't feel satisfied with that answer and I feel like I need a little bit more. Being assertive in that respect, it has been invaluable. So I don't like confrontation. I don't like ever feeling like I've done anything wrong, and I don't want to be angry and in that I hate confrontation. So I always feel like if I don't ask, I will never know the answer. So by asking those questions and asserting my standpoint of, I don't quite understand this, can you please explain? Or this is what I feel about this situation, is that accurate? Like, again, those expectations are managed, and I feel like it's really, really helped with my understanding and my recovery and my emotional intelligence around it. So being headstrong and assertive isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No, I agree. Charlotte, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, and I'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon. Bye.